Let's dive further into this topic now. I'm joined by Irene Chen. She's an international trade attorney and previously served as legal advisor at the U.S. Department of Commerce and the U.S. International Trade Commission. Just want to get your thoughts on where things stand right now. These talks appear to have concluded for the evening. We're just 2.5 hours away from midnight. What do you think we'll see?
I think in the very short term, I think there probably won't be a deal, because with President Trump putting out there that there's going to be an increase of 25% in tariffs on Friday, the Chinese probably don't want to look like they are giving in or capitulating because of that direct threat and the fact that we put in place so soon. But in the intermediate term, both sides are better off with a deal. President Trump has indicated he's going to impose tariffs on the remaining $300 billion in imports from China, and that will have a very significant effect on the U.S. economy. And so even though President Trump is using a lot of strong language, he is up for re-election in 2020, and he has to consider all of the effects on the American people and the U.S. economy, as does China.
What has been your read over the last few days this week with this sort of turnaround? A lot of people were expecting to see a trade deal by the end of this week, where we are now. And yet here we are, where we have the threat of tariffs coming through. What have you made of it, and what do you think is happening right now behind the scenes?
I think they're trying to hammer out some very thorny issues, and probably most specifically the enforcement issues, because the Chinese would like all of the tariffs to be lifted. However, the U.S. is looking ahead, looking in the future. How are they going to enforce the terms of the agreement? And at the forefront, you have Ambassador Lighthizer, who was a former U.S. trade lawyer, defends against Chinese dumping and countervailing duty actions. So he's very keen on that type of enforcement mechanism. And so I think that both sides, they're still at the table and they're still trying to work towards a deal, but these details, it's going to take some time.
You had mentioned Trump looking ahead to 2020. Do you envision that we could see something sooner than later? I mean, where we're standing now, back in November, there was a sort of reprieve from the trade war. The deadline got pushed back to March, and now it got lifted. Here we are again today. Sooner than later?
I think it will be sooner, because 10% is one thing, 10% tariff is one thing, 25%, we're talking about over double. And that's going to be on $200 billion in tariffs. And then for the remaining $300 billion in imports from China, he's talking about putting tariffs on that. So he's got to follow through with that, because he's already put it out there.
And a lot of American industries spoke out today, very concerned about this 25%, saying it would basically kill their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this day and age, we're talking about a global integrated economy. So a lot of U.S. factories, businesses, manufacturers, they source internationally. They source from China, and it's not easy to compete with their global counterparts if they're having to pay 25% tariffs. They're looking at facing layoffs and possibly a threat against their business.
All right, Irene Chen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.